There's a lot of effort into making something look simple and not be just plain. Simple can be very rich. That's really key to me, trying to make pieces simple and rich at the same time. My work is not cutting edge, it's not nouveau, it's not art. But what I've been doing is exploring a few sets of ideas, trying to explore each one more deeply. That's what first drew me to things in Japan, in craft in Japan. They really go deep into an idea. For me, making a small change is a big deal. If I'm working on a piece and adding something, what is that saying about the whole piece? Am I just really in love with this technique? Am I being ego-driven? That's really important to me, that discussion. When I started out, the two biggest aesthetic influences were Nakashima and Jim Krenov. Jim, a lot because of his philosophy and also his work, which is just, to me, still astonishing. And Nakashima's work, too, I thought was really amazing for different reasons. And all of his work involves this grounding. Things really have a nice transition to the earth. I'm using tapered legs a lot, or curved legs that bend out at the bottom a lot, especially in case work, so that the whole case sort of flares out at the bottom. So that's one thing to me, that transition, get it to feel grounded. Then I've started using different things to try to get things to be light on top of that. Before I put the top on a case piece, I'll reveal the top a little bit so that there's a recess, a shadow line, and also the top is lifted off the piece. Or the tops turn up at the ends so that the pieces, hopefully, don't look heavy. I try to make all my pieces from one flitch of the material because, it's consistent in color and grain pattern and all that. It's very, very important to me how you select your wood. Even if you don't know it, it's one of the things that you respond to immediately. How different grains affect the way a piece looks. The kind of wood that I like, in general, since my work is quiet, I try to have my work be quiet and sort of simple. I don't want them to be featureless, but I want it to be relatively straight grain. I'd like the grain to be as tight as that species can get. Clear. I'm not really into defects. I don't normally like high figure woods, but I'm looking for very premium material, unfortunately. Getting that material is very difficult and extremely expensive. Usually I'm competing with people who are buying these logs as veneer logs. I got interested in woodworking in the early 70s, living in Boston and renovating a house. I was an automobile mechanic. I was working on Alfa Romeos. Every day I would go to lunch around the corner and then hang out in the bookstore for half an hour. I was doing a little bit of hobby kind of woodworking. I saw Jim's first book on the shelf and just completely blew me away. I'm buying this book. That's really how I got into it. A little bit of an epiphany, I guess, but there it was. I'm in a technical tradition, and I feel responsible to that technical tradition. You could probably argue that if you butt jointed two things together and used epoxy, it would be just fine. I don't do that because I'm representing a tradition. I dovetail my drawers together. I do it by hand. You could shoot drywall screws in there. It would probably hold up as well. Really, if we're really serious about it, it probably would hold up as well with the glues we have in there. That's not why I do it. It's not because I think it's technically better. It's my representation of that tradition. If you want to have the hand skills that it takes to do this, you have to do a lot. And there's just no other way. You have to spend a lot of time at it. The way to learn how to cut dovetails is to cut dovetails. The way to learn how to sharpen is to sharpen. I give classes in it. I can talk to people about it. But really what you need to do is see what a sharp tool is and looks like and what the process is, and then replicate that process until your hands can do it. And it's in your hands. There's no jig, there's no anything, it's just your hands. It's a hand skill. What grid work lets you do is play with texture and depth and pattern and breaking pattern in really interesting ways. The process appeals to me, that I can do it the same way it was done 300, 400 years ago. I'm just sitting here doing the same thing some little guy was somewhere then. It's an old hand process, but it's a very sophisticated hand process. And that's what I like about a lot of handwork. The hand can be amazingly sophisticated, way more sophisticated than the machine. I like that. And I also like the repetitiveness of it that's repetitive but not mind-numbing. Meditative almost, where you've got to do this little thing over and over again, and you've got a lot of them to do. But each one has to be just right. And if you aren't just right with your hands, they're wrong. So it's not like you're just pulling the drill press over and over again. Why am I doing this? who's making handmade things now and why? Why the heck are you doing this? Especially in our culture where it's sort of this huge anachronism that we all face. So there's that big question out there. But within that question is really, what are you doing? And for me, it was, I'm using furniture to find my own voice aesthetically. I think that that's really important because that's your contribution, an advancement of the aesthetic vocabulary that we all have. I have been extremely lucky to have a wife and family that have been really supportive. My wife, Donna, amazingly supportive. We moved out here about 17 years ago. Acton, Massachusetts. We're right on the border of Acton and Concord, where I could build my own shop and not be hassled about doing it. And it's beautiful, northwest of Boston. So we built here, and my shop is 50 steps from my house. It's not bad. I don't think it gets a whole lot better. It's a pretty privileged existence in a lot of ways.